Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Before I start today, I'd like to thank all my viewers, subscribers again for their support and interest in the channel, for their help financially through PayPal, through Patreon, through buying products like this in the Maneco 64T Spring store. It helps a lot to keep this channel going. And of course, it helps me keep committed to getting the message across of free markets, of freedom, of sound money, of the fraudulent nature of central banking and our monetary system. And I have to say, it's very frustrating a lot of times when you see that our leaders, supposed leaders in politics, in banking, in money, keep going down the path, the wrong path, in my opinion. With that today, I like to talk about the zombie economy and the Wirtschaftswunder. So what is the Wirtschaftswunder? Well, it's the German economic miracle of post-World War II. What is the zombie economy? Well, it's the command socialist economy that we are slowly but surely moving into, not only here in the UK, but everywhere around the Western world, the United States included, continent of Europe, even worse, I would say. And it's ironic because about a month ago, on the 8th of May, they even made it a holiday here in the UK to celebrate Victory in Europe Day, the day that we in the UK defeated National Socialism, that we defeated an authoritarian government, and that the people who died for this country died for freedom and liberty. It's ironic because since that day, this country has been adopting the economic policy that brought Germany down, socialism, instead of focusing on freedom and free market. So you kind of wonder, was that all in vain? So I'm gonna go through a passage in this book here, War and Gold by Kwasi Kwarteng. He's actually an MP in the UK, and he wrote a very good book. It's a 500-year history of empires, adventures, and debt. And I'm going to go through the part about Germany after World War II. Just to give you an idea, this is what Wikipedia says about Wirtschaftswunder. That means economic miracle in Germany, or wonder. Wirtschaft means economy. So it says the term Wirtschaftswunder, economic miracle, also known as the miracle on the Rhine, describes the rapid reconstruction and development of the economies of West Germany and Austria after World War II. The expression referring to this phenomenon was first used by the Times of London in 1950. So there you go. So with that, I'm going to jump to the section in this book here, War and Gold. I highly recommend it if you like history and you're interested in money and debt and crisis. It's going to take a while, but I think it's important that we go through what happened in Germany exactly economically after World War II. And then after I go through that, I'm going to go quickly through an article that's come out recently here in the UK, in the FT, about what they're trying to do to get the economy going. Some people are comparing, of course, what's happening to war. We've got a complete shutdown of the economy, but we're taking, of course, the zombie Keynesian socialist direction. And don't forget that even in his general theory, which was his most famous book, the German version, published in 1936, in the introduction, Keynes said that his policies would be better adopted in an authoritarian kind of society. So keep that in mind. So let's start. Germany's predicament as a defeated power had essentially left the country under the control of the victorious Allies. Its position was similar to that of most European countries where there existed a dollar shortage, in the sense that they lacked the resources and the industrial capacity for producing sufficient goods and services, both for home consumption and for export. Sounds familiar? Dollar shortage? With very little industrial capacity and no real currency, Germany was built up by the Allies from low beginnings. Germany, in the wake of the defeat of the Nazis in 1945, had been split into 4 zones under the control of the Americans, the British, and the French, and the Soviet Union. Despite the presence of 3 other powers, the United States, as a consequence of its economic strength, was the dominant power in the reconstruction of post-war Germany, and the key figure among its personnel was Lucius D. Clay, a general who was appointed military governor of the U.S. zone in Western Germany in 1947. The power of the U.S. in both Germany and Japan was represented by formidable military figures like General Clay and Douglas MacArthur, who were both bureaucrats and warlords. Their education and experience had been entirely within the institution of the U.S. Army. Am I saying we need to adapt military governments? No, but just bear with me, and so you can see what kind of policies that were adopted. Trained as an engineer within the military, Clay brought a technocratic efficiency to his task in Germany. He had played an important role as chief of procurement for the U.S. Army during the Second World War, earning distinction with such feats as procuring 299 million pairs of trousers, 50 million field jackets, and 2.3 million trucks, among other large quantities of material essential for the war effort. His general efficiency had been such that James Burns, the Secretary of State, had told President Roosevelt that in 6 months Clay could run General Motors or U.S. Steel. Clay's own account of his role in Germany stressed the chaos and confusion which still prevailed in 1945. And this is a quote from him. The black market was rampant, he remembered, and the currency system had broken down. There you go, currency had broken down. A coupon book system had been introduced in November 45, in which coupons had been purchased in dollars. The German currency itself, the Reichsmark, Clay remembered, was worthless and no longer had public confidence. The old currency was so discredited that by the spring of 47, about half the value of all commercial trade, at least in the Anglo-American zone, was transacted on a barter or compensation basis. Many barter transactions were performed with the aid of cigarettes. We've spoken about this before, right, in Germany. So I'll continue. The politics of German currency was set against deteriorating relations between the 4 powers. On January 1st, 47, the British and American zones were combined to form the bi-zone. The economic burden of administering their zone had grown too great for the British to beat, since they were borrowing American dollars to feed the Germans in their zone while food was still being rationed in Britain. It soon became apparent that the bi-zone was the nucleus of a new political entity, and it pursued a single economic policy under the guidance of Ludwig Erhard, an economist with a strong belief in free market liberalism. So there you go. Not a strong belief in socialism, but in free markets. Ludwig Erhard, that's an important name to remember. In response, the Soviets created the German Economic Commission on June 14, 1947. Meanwhile, the responsibility that the Allies felt in regard to Germany was a direct consequence of the terms of unconditional surrender, which had been a rallying cry for the Allies since 43. So that was pretty much what was going on in Germany after World War II. It was a mess, right? And they had to kind of sort it out. They had worthless currency, barter, a lot of debt. So now let's look at what was going on here in terms of the currency. It says, under the tutelage of such men as Lucius Clay, the German economy in the Western zones was guided in a tightly controlled manner, unlike in some other empires where wide latitude was often given to the man on the spot. It was surprising how closely Clay was monitored from Washington. In March 48, it was even hinted by the US government that the Americans would not cancel the old debts incurred by the Nazi regime. Clay suggested to his superiors in the US government that the cancellation of the old debt was a primary necessity if we are to restore confidence in the proposed new currency. The main obstacle to the new currency was not economic but political, in the form of the Soviet Union, which controlled the eastern part of Germany. So there you go. And that's one of the reasons why I don't have much hope nowadays, because the bankers who are the biggest lenders, they're going to make it very hard for governments or the people in power or supposedly in power to forgive a lot of the debts that we have, because we know that the debt is the problem. And but what they keep doing, the governments and the central banks, they keep increasing in the debt. So we can't have a sound currency with the kind of debt that we have. And it's interesting that a military man like Clay told that to the American administration, to the US government. So let's continue. Persistent bad relations between Allies and the Soviets during the first half of 48 led to the eventual introduction of the Deutschmark in the French, British, and American zones on Sunday, June 20, 1948. Citizens in these zones were permitted to convert their first 60 old marks into 40 Deutschmarks. Beyond this amount, old marks would be converted into Deutschmarks at a rate of 100 to 6.5. Pensions, salaries, and rents, conveniently enough, would be converted at a rate of 1 to 1. As so often was the case in the periods of monetary upheaval, people who own hard assets like factories and property benefited, while many others saw most of their savings disappear as a consequence of reform. So that's why I keep telling people that they need to have hard assets. They need to have precious metals as well, because they are monetary hard assets. Clay paid fulsome tribute to his financial advisor, Joseph Dodge, a commercial banker from Detroit. This is a quote here: "The success of the issue of the new currency and the effectiveness of the reform were evidence of the careful, painstaking work of the Allied and German experts. In particular, Clay believed Dodge's leadership and ability were primarily responsible for the outstanding result of one of the major currency measures recorded in financial history. Together, Clay and Dodge had embarked upon tackling the difficult issue of German currency reform as early as the beginning of 46, even before the buy zone had been created." So as you can see, you cannot have, in my opinion, a potential economic miracle or a Wirtschaftswunder unless you have a sound currency. And the only way to do that is to restructure the monetary, the debt system. Let's have a look at what the new currency, the effect it had on the western zones of Germany. It says the introduction of the new currency in the western zones affected a stark change in the German economy. The controls on many basic goods fell away. Shop windows and shelves filled up with goods and production lines increased overnight. an immediate buying spree occurred. Konrad Adenauer himself remembered that until June 48, the economy was planned down to the smallest detail, down to trouser buttons and penny items. In his memoirs, Adenauer, the veteran politician who was 73 when he first became Chancellor of West Germany, recommended that every economist and every politician who is concerned with questions of the economic order should be urged to study the course of events in the Anglo-American zone, bizonal area since 1948. So here's another interesting part. This is not about monetary affairs, but about fiscal affairs, or what the government should be able to spend. Even at this early date, exports proved to be the lifeblood of the future German economy. This emphasized the importance of avoiding inflation in the home market. Inflation would inevitably drive up costs, making German exports less competitive in foreign markets. Well, nowadays people think that we need to have inflation to devalue the currency, so to make exports cheaper. They forget, though, that a lot of the inputs for industry, so they can produce goods to export, a lot of times you have to import those inputs, and if your currency goes down the drain, it's very difficult. Unsurprisingly, coupled with the concern for a sound currency, there was reiterated the old warning about the need for balanced budgets. A dual prohibition stands athwart the path of budgetary deficits. The first of these prohibitions was the dictate of military government currency reform laws that budgets should be kept in balance. As if this was not enough, there was a prohibition included in Article 115 of the new Western German Basic Law against any borrowing except in the case of extraordinary need, and as a rule only for expenditure for productive purposes. In addition to these prohibitions, the creation of fiat money, even for the investment purposes, in the form, say, of a central bank credit and the Reconstruction Loan Corporation, was to be resisted. The Allied Banking Commissioner still exercised final control over the policies of the Bank Deutscher Länder, the new central bank, which would become the Bundesbank in 1957. So there you go. Sound money, balanced budgets, and an aversion to fiat currency, of course. So this is what the author says at the end of this chapter, and this is really revealing, very interesting. And then I'll go into the FT article. The situation in which Britain and Germany found themselves at the end of the 1940s was somewhat paradoxical. Britain, one of the victors in the Second World War, had in a perfectly democratic process elected a socialist government. West Germany had been given a military government, essentially under US control. Britain adopted socialism, which was what destroyed Germany, right? National socialism. So Britain adopted that system. It's paradoxical, as he says. While the Americans imposed a managed form of capitalism on West Germany, Britain had struggled to maintain the historic value of its currency against the US dollar. It had failed. West Germany had been granted a new currency, again under American direction, which had been valued so as to boost its exports. It had been forced, under the shadow of defeat, to adapt itself to a more modern international competitive world of trade. Britain had turned in on itself in the pursuit of utopian socialism, or zombie economics, I would say. That's what we're doing now, while still clinging to old glories in the form of an overvalued currency, which could only harm its international trading position. I would say what was harming the UK's trading position yeah, could be a overvalued currency, but it was the fact that it didn't have a free market, sound money, balanced budget system like the German system. So now we come to present day. Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, set for July stimulus package to stave off recession. UK Chancellor focused on training and infrastructure, plus help for technology companies. So we're going to the Befehlswirtschaft, which in Germany means the command economy. That was the kind of economy that Germany ran during the Third Reich, a national command socialist economy. So isn't it ironic, as I said earlier, we're celebrating here the victory over authoritarianism and socialism on VE Day, May 8th. And here we are adopting these authoritarian and command economy policies. So why isn't it going to work? Why am I so against government intervention, fiscal policy, budget deficits, Keynesian stimulus? Well, because the best allocator of resources and wealth is the free market. Governments don't have any wealth. When they say they're going to pump billions of pounds or even hundreds of billions like they're doing now, all they're doing is transferring wealth from some of the people who still have some wealth and allocating it to people who haven't really done any work or who haven't really saved and who don't deserve that wealth. So yeah, instead of adopting the lessons of post-World War II Germany, and I know they were under military control of the Allies and the United States especially, we're adopting the economic policies of National Socialism, or the command economy. I just want to show another article here that I saw yesterday and made my blood boil, and it's very frustrating. Investor plans 15 billion support for UK companies toiling with crisis loans. So this fund, called Business Growth Fund, proposes state-backed scheme to aid indebted companies emerging from pandemic. So this Business Growth Fund, they want the best of both worlds. They want to invest their money and have the government work together with them. And why do they want that? Well, because they don't really trust the companies that they're investing in. They don't really think they're companies that would succeed in a free market. So they need the support of you, the taxpayer. And that's the worst kind of economic policy, a public and private partnership. That's National Socialism. Again, that's the command economy. And I found it amazing that one of the companies they want to save is a company called Trunky. And it's a company that makes children's travel equipment, like children's luggage. I mean, is that really essential, economically essential in this day and age? I think it's just ridiculous. So that's the situation we're in. And yes, I'm frustrated because very few people higher up making policy, the bankers especially as well, central bankers, they don't want to know about this. They want to keep this command economy. They want to keep the debt going. They want to keep debasing the currency. They want to continue the deficit spending. And as you saw in Germany, the currency there before they had the reforms had no value. People had no faith in it. Only the people that held hard assets actually came out well from that. So if you hold your wealth in paper, especially in fiat currency, if they continue to go down this economic path of Keynesianism, of zombie economics, you can be sure that your currency is going to become worthless even more as time goes by. So please share this video far and wide. talk to friends and family about the situation. We need to get the word out. We need to get out of this Keynesian socialist path because it's not a good path. It's not going to lead to a British Wirtschaftswunder at all, or miracle. It's going to lead to more and more misery, I would say. So I won't do the markets this morning because this video went on too long. Maybe I'll do another video today in the afternoon covering the markets when the US markets are officially open. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. And as I said, please share it far and wide. Think about subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet. And you can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and all these other platforms below here. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.